Welcome to the Supplino webinar with our wonderful expert and consultant, Kevin Smith, today. Hey, Kevin.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you
How
for
are you
the
doing?
intro.
Yeah, good. All right. We're gonna have a good, quick webinar today. We have a lot of information packed in here. For anybody attending, I want to remind you that this is being recorded, so you can always look at it later and reference it, as well as everybody that signed up with an email. We will be sending a one-pager with Kevin's 5 tips and information on him, so no need to take notes on that. If you want to just listen along, you should be all set. And let's launch into it, Kevin. So let's see if I can get this. There we go. All right. So quick intro for me. Those of you that don't need me, I'm Michelle from Supplino. I am a career manufacturing and supply chain expert and started Supplino to provide fast access to experts like Kevin in manufacturing and supply chain. So that's really what we do: consultants, freelancers, and agencies all around manufacturing in all aspects of supply chain, from procurement to logistics. We really cover it all. So that's us. My co-founder, Eugene, will be running the meeting, so you might see him. He's going to manage the chat. So anybody that has questions, please just put them in the chat. Or if you have any technical problems, let him know and he will help you out. Let me get the next one. There we go. Kevin, you want to give a quick intro of yourself here?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're located in the world. So I'm Kevin Smith. I have over a decade of experience in supply chain across multiple markets in Europe, Asia, and now in the United States. I'm mainly providing supply chain and operation expertise across 5 main activities, which is demand planning and forecasting, sourcing and vendor management, inventory management, data analytics of the supply chain, and ERP and software tools implementation. So I'm running my company called Case Consulting, where we help small and medium-sized businesses to basically scale and set up the proper foundations of their supply chain and operations to support their growth.
Yeah, great. And so you're the perfect guy to talk about this topic today, Kevin. You want to remind everybody where you are located, just if they're curious.
I'm located in Los Angeles, California.
Okay, all right, great. And you have that wonderful Los Angeles accent, I think, right? English.
No, born and raised in Paris, where I grew up, and I'm living in the United States now since 6 years.
Yeah, okay, great, super. Okay, so let's get to the content here. Let me see if I can advance a slide. Okay, so as we go through here, we are going to be talking about unleashing company growth with aligned suppliers. Kevin has 5 tips, and as we go through the conversation, we'll highlight all 5. And again, we'll send you guys a one-pager with all the 5 after the whole session is over. So let's start with, first of all, aligned suppliers. Kevin, what is a supplier? Let's talk about that, because people have different terms. What's your terminology for a supplier and what we're going to talk about today?
A supplier is an external body that's going to provide you a product, a physical product, to your organization, as opposed as a vendor that will provide you a service such as freight forwarder or 3PL or any entities that only providing services.
Yeah, so like a whatever sterilization service or something you might have for product. So in this case, we're mostly going to be talking about factory products, but what we're talking about, I think, can apply also to service providers that don't have capacity to help you also,
Absolutely.
right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
okay. So either problems can come either way. And so let's talk about, why do you think scaling is so problematic for suppliers? What do they run into, and why are they not prepared to scale with clients easily?
These multiple factors that comes here. One of the first is a lack of visibility, probably, and communication, probably from an entity to another, which prevent your supplier to be properly equipped to help you scale. There's also another component here, which might be the proper limitation of the supplier. So they're already at capacity or have a bunch of clients, or
Yeah.
maybe simply their operations already reach their kind of peak operational excellence capabilities, and it's really complicated for them to find more capacity in their value chain.
Yeah, and they're certainly not going to tell you this. I mean, they're right.
No,
Typically, their salespeople are not
there's
going to
very
be
few
warning
chances.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And so, but why should then, and especially I find this in startups, you know, why should the leadership even care? Because a lot of times I hear from founders and senior leaders, look, that's not my problem. That's the supplier's problem. They told me they could do this. you know, I'm just going to yell at them and tell them that they have to do my product and they have to find the capacity somewhere.
Yelling doesn't resolve challenges and issues.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might just give a little bump to get things going, but that's not the core of what's gonna help solve the issues. So definitely owners, leaders of organization needs to integrate their suppliers as a core component of their business, and they cannot separate the supplier business and the supplier challenges from their own business and challenges, because ultimately the challenges of the supplier or your vendors become yours.
Yeah.
So a proper way to approach that is to cooperate and collaborate together and embrace the difficulties and challenges of your suppliers to help them fix those in order to help the supplier provide you the best service at the
Yeah.
quality expected.
Yeah, which is not easy, right? And I think that's one of your first tips. So let me get that up on the thing is your recommendation here.
Absolutely. So your suppliers' problems are your problems. So you
Yeah.
need to help them identify them or identify them yourself, voice them to your suppliers, and then help them solve the bottlenecks. You might have solutions, they might have solutions. You might have resources in your network that can help them to be better and provide you a better service. So everything that you can do to help your supplier fix their issues, you should do it, because ultimately this is the issues that gonna prevail your own organization to flourish.
Yeah, yeah, which takes a lot of time for a supply, right? I mean, this is an additional workload for many companies to now not only with their own problems, but now they have to go in and kind of try to help the supplier, right?
Um, we can see that way, but ultimately supply chain are work and manufacturing are working together.
Mm,
So yes, you already have your own issues in your internally. But as I said, the vendors or suppliers issues are completely part of your own supply chain. If they cannot deliver, you wouldn't be able to deliver and execute the rest of your value chain. So it's
yeah.
critical to be able to assist them and help them in that instance.
Yeah, so you're saying they're really an integrated part of your company. They're not like a separate
Absolutely.
entity, right? You should really view them
Exactly.
together. Okay. And you know, that's true, but what many companies have many different suppliers, right? Especially like if you're in electronics, you're going to have, right, you know, hundreds of parts on your bill of material. Some companies have thousands of suppliers, right? How
Absolutely.
do you handle that when you have so many suppliers that you're managing?
That's a great question, Michelle, and thank you for asking me that. So there's different ways to approach that. Of course, everybody knows the Pareto law with the 20-80. So we
Yeah,
can classify our suppliers with the ABC classification. And on top of that, we can add another dimension, which is the velocity of the items that those suppliers are basically supplying us,
yeah,
how those items are moving through our flow of consumption with the XYZ analysis that's going to
yeah.
come and add some color to the ABC analysis. So that way we can manage thoroughly our suppliers by order or criticality as
Hmm.
well, their weight on the revenue, but we
Yeah,
can also go by the bill of materials in manufacturing, for example, and
yeah,
looking at what are the critical components that basically we cannot go and source anywhere else, and that are the major part of the assembly of the product. So
Yeah, okay.
those suppliers need to have an integrated relationship with you, as if they fail, you are going to fail. We
Yeah.
can see in the past few weeks, bunch of automotive plants had to shut down because their suppliers couldn't supply parts.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of how it can have repercussion into your own supply chain.
Yeah, sure. Okay, and so that's, let me get your second tip up here on your top 20%. And I think it's a really good point that your top 20% isn't necessarily just your spend, right?
Not
It's also looking at the your key parts, your lead, maybe your high lead time part, right? There can be different
absolutely.
aspects to this, right? Yeah, that's a really good one. And suppliers, let me switch into forecast for a second, because they often, you mentioned it in the beginning, they often do ask for forecasts, right? But especially in a time of growth, when you're growing as a company, you may not have a lot of confidence in your forecast. And so I've been at companies where we've been very reluctant to share forecasts with suppliers. What's your advice on that?
My advice on that is a forecast, an educated guesstimate, or a real educated forecast is better than nothing.
Yeah, okay.
And from there, we can go and basically allocate part of this forecast to the demand and have the supplier produce those goods, and see how we can stagger the production in the eventuality where we might have fluctuation. Of
Yeah,
course, it's going to be contingent to the MOQ, EOQ, what it costs to the supplier to launch the production. So
yeah,
that discussion that you need to have with your suppliers to gain flexibility and agility. The world is evolving so quick. The consumer habits are changing so quick that we need to be able to pivot and being flexible.
yeah. Okay, so let me put that up. Oops, I went backwards, sorry. There we go. All right. So even if the forecast isn't perfect, your advice is to just share it anyway. And
Absolutely.
work with the variation. Is that what that's what I hear you saying, right? Is if the
Yes.
variation is up, then work with it, but at least you have some kind of baseline to work from,
Exactly.
right? Okay, okay. Because I think a lot of people do worry about getting locked in based on their forecast, and then the supplier comes back to them with inventory charges and everything else, right? Especially if they over forecast. Yeah.
I understand. In that case, it's always good to be conservative. We need to understand something is demand never will be consumed at the same time.
Mm.
Those peak in demand are outliers. We cannot really anticipate them. They are what
Yeah.
they are. It's great because it brings revenue. At the end, you make money, your supplier is making money. So the reactivity and the agility of your supplier is also on his own is beneficial for them, as it's beneficial for you. So
Yeah.
that's how the collaboration and the tips number one, embrace the challenges of your supplier, is critical to build that strong relationship that then will allow your organization to gain that flexibility, and in that partnership where you can share numbers and put a caution on that. Hey guys, that's what we think we might do, but this is basically a safety forecast. We are not overshooting. We might have more demand. If we see an increase in demand in the 2-3 first week of the launch of the product, how can you quickly adjust to produce more? We can
Yeah.
have this conversation with a supplier, which
Yeah.
is a partner, an integrated partner of your own organization.
And how do you know how much capacity they really have? Right? Because as you're talking to them, a lot of factories will tell you, oh, no problem, right? Yeah, no problem. We'll, yeah, when you ramp, we'll be there for you, right? But I mean, can you check that? I mean, and how can you check that? What do you do? You need to trust your factory ultimately if they're telling you something.
So this come first on the vetting process when you onboard your supplier from the get-go. I know a lot of times it's kind of a step that is skipped
Yeah.
for different reasons. And ultimately it's come back further down the line when the company is growing. So to prevent that, if we do it since the get-go and during the vetting process, the interest is ideally to go and visit the infrastructure of your supplier.
Yeah.
You're gonna learn a lot from a visit. Secondly, is to basically ask your supplier to provide you 3 to 5 companies and point of contact that they work with, and just have a chat with those, see
Yeah.
how they think, what they say about it.
And specifically there, you're talking about like, ask them about like the volume and, you know, if you're
Absolutely.
small or you're planning to ramp, do they have the volume, right? Okay, all right, gotcha.
And the third approach would be basically it's gonna be on the fly. When your supplier is already producing your goods and
Yeah.
you kept that vetting process initially, now you need to have this conversation. And what a supplier might do is sometimes they're gonna outsource and they're gonna tell you upfront. Sometimes they're gonna produce it in-house and they're gonna open more capacity with more workers, maybe more shift
Yeah.
to try to open capacity within their corporations.
Yeah, okay, so, and that's your, oops, I keep doing this,
As
sorry.
number
I am not the best slide sharer here today. All right, so that's what is, so you're saying really verify it. Don't just
you
trust them,
have to
right?
verify the capacity planning of your
Yeah,
supply.
okay. Okay, all right. And then in what if, so as you go with the let's say you've done this, you've skipped it initially, you're with the supplier, you left the supplier, but you're starting to check their capacity, and now you find out, like, I don't think these guys have the capacity for us. Like, we're going to double our volume in the next 3 years, or we're going to double every year over the next 3 years, and these guys are going to run out in year 2. What do you do then? If you know what I mean, if they're actually a supplier you like, but then you don't find they can't support you, you know, how do you handle that?
There's 2 ways. You might like them, but their efficiency might be just okay. You
Yeah.
might like them and they are great, or you don't have a stunning relationship. They are just okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with they're just okay. You need to immediately understand that your business is growing, which as a leader you should know, and try to identify other source of supplies or other manufacturer that are able to produce that good for you.
Yeah.
So make sure you have your bill of materials, all the specification of your product ready to eventually launch a new venture with another supplier that you might allocate just a fraction of your production. That's the first thing to do. So you launch a new vetting process with new suppliers, and you make sure to choose one that has the capabilities to ramp up with you.
Yeah.
The other scenario is the supplier is great, but and the supplier is you have a great relationship with them. They're doing an okay job. You don't want to leave them.
Yeah.
You need to make sure to, well, you can choose which product you can leave there, which might not be critical because they're just okay.
Yeah.
It can be your B product or your Y product with less velocity. So that's a supplier that you're going to feed here and there with product that have less importance and criticality for your revenue growth.
Yeah.
Then there's the last options where the supply is great, but they maxed out their capacity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this specific case, make sure to not quit this supplier. This supplier, you can still fit them with your critical product that are the A product and the X product, and those products, this supplier can still provide them and manufacture them for you.
Okay. And that's
As you
your
know,
last tip, right?
absolutely.
And I think that's a really interesting one, because I think there's always the temptation that when something doesn't work with a supplier to immediately resource, right? So let's just find somebody, we just move all the business to another one. And then that one doesn't work and you have to resource and you move all the business again, right?
Well, I oppose 2 things.
Mm.
Doesn't work and capacity limitation are 2 different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might have a great supplier with capacity limitations. You might have a supplier just okay with extended capacity. I rather working with a great supplier with limited capacity that I know would be able to make my bread and butter great.
Yeah.
Instead to have an okay supplier with extended capacity. We can always work on opening capacity at the with a second provider, a third provider. It's not a problem. but
Yeah.
the quality of the product that a supplier can guarantee you, you should never turn back to it.
Yeah, it's true. It's really hard to find a really good supplier, isn't it? And they're worth their weight in gold when you find them. So I see what you're
Absolutely.
saying. Yeah,
It
yeah,
takes time to find a great supplier with where you build a stronger relationship and that is reliable. Of course, you will have hiccups on the road. That's what supply chain manufacturing are about, logistics.
yeah.
But inevitably, those supplier will be your partner for your growth.
All right, great, great. All right. So that's all the questions that I had for you as part of this, and the 5 tips I think are really helpful. Let me pause here. Jean, do we have any questions from the audience for Kevin? We have about like 5 minutes allocated or 6 minutes that he can answer
Not
some
in the
questions.
chat, but not in the chat, but let's open it up to the team and to the participants and see if they have any
Okay.
questions.
Okay. If not, I do have a couple follow-ups for you, Kevin. That's for sure.
Hi, Michelle. It's Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you? Hey, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to comment on, in the very beginning, the definition between vendor and supplier. And I found that very interesting because we have ERP systems that don't necessarily follow that
Yeah.
and
Yep.
I was thinking about our current system and how actually they're changing the terminology to something even more vague and generic. So I just found that interesting that there is a definition and yet it can be very broad depending on your organization and your application. So
Yeah, it's a good observation because Kevin, that definition, this is your definition, right?
Well, that's my definition, but that's also the definition I learned with it at school and
Yeah,
with different
yeah.
professionals.
Yeah,
With my
because
peers.
I'll tell you what, over the years, I have heard a million different definitions where people have told me suppliers are one thing, vendors are, you shouldn't call anybody a vendor. There was maybe I'm not aging myself here now, but there was a big time where saying somebody was a vendor was kind of insulting, and supplier implied that it was more of a partnership, and
Mhm.
vendor implied that it was more transactional.
the going term now is business partner.
Oh, well, yeah, well,
I like that, Sarah.
yeah. Yeah,
This
but
is
key
who they
partners,
are.
I mean, this is kind of what
Yes.
Kevin was talking about, right? Is, identifying on that tip too, when you do have it, because you will get a lot of different suppliers over your generation as a business. And the more you start out with 1 or 2 key ones, and then it quickly like explodes. So having that ability to focus on your top 20% is really important, right?
You just mentioned something that it's also very important here, Michelle. You talk about the explosion of the number of supplier. That's something also company needs to focus on
Yeah,
and avoid. More supplier you have, less control you get.
yeah.
And you need to have control to have a good execution of your value chain.
Yeah. Have you done projects where I know that they're out there where companies are now in the situation where they have way too many suppliers and then they have to actually consolidate them?
Yes,
You know?
it happens. I led a project, such project in the personal care industry
Mm,
during the COVID. So the
yeah.
company exploded due to a national program with Costco,
Okay.
and hand sanitizer and antibacterial soap. And so quickly, the company allocated their product to be manufactured. They outsourced the manufacturing because they didn't have the capacity.
Yeah.
So they quickly had about 7 different vendors. Well, in that case, yeah, vendors, suppliers that were producing the goods for them,
Yeah.
and then they were consolidating them into their own facility prior to ship it to Costco. So they lost control of it, which
Yeah.
led in terms of in delays, and of course, obviously in fines when you work with big box retailers.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Luckily, they were able to avoid to have the cancellation of the program. I came on board and we kind of start to streamline which suppliers are okay, which are just bad and we need to separate, and how can we vertically integrate some of those processes internally to
Mhm.
keep up with the demand of Costco. It was also TJ Maxx and Bed Bath & Beyond at the time.
Yeah,
So those three mastodons were demanding product from this organization. So we had to trim down the number of suppliers and only keep the two suppliers that were the two vendors that were excellent are manufacturing the product, co-packing it on the expected time. And
I think that's amazing because so many companies are concerned about we don't have enough supply. And then they do that exact thing that you're talking about here, which is they then spread out the supply, right? And to different suppliers and different factories. And of course, everybody thinks, you need 3 suppliers for a quote to get good pricing. So the more suppliers that I have, the more competitive it will be. But then they don't anticipate here what you're talking about is now they have multiple people shipping multiple products and they've lost control of that, right?
It's way more moving parts to control. And you talk about something very important. You talk about price and quotes. Basically, go ahead, Sarah.
Where does so my thought is the company wants to grow. Ultimate growth means you will have more suppliers, whether it's for one product or for a new product line. So where I see is, okay, yes, you don't want to just take off, but where does your workforce come into play? Because I would say, yes, I'm going to onboard 5 new suppliers in the next year, just because I have to. I figured it out. I have to. So, but I don't want to lose control. So I need more people. I need more workforce on my end to keep that control. And I think that's what a lot of people, they don't want to hire more people and they think their current people can manage it. And that's where things can go south really fast.
Also, this is absolutely true.
Yeah.
As you scale the number of suppliers, you might need also to scale the number of resources internally to manage the supplier.
Yeah.
And to come back to the initial point that I was mentioning about pricing, this price, quality, and lead time.
Yeah.
You can only have 2 at a time. And unfortunately, very few people understand that. It's very complicated to have the 3 in the same time. So when we're quoting, launching an RFP or an RFQ and trying to get the best price, that's the best price is at the best quality with the lead time that I need. That's the question you need to ask yourself as a leader of a small medium-sized organization.
Which am I able to trade off? Like, where's my priority on that triangle?
Exactly. You need to know where is your priority there. And if you say, oh, that's all 3, well, you're lying to yourself basically, because you won't be able to have 3 those 3 together.
Ultimately, you're going to make a trade-off somewhere, is where you're saying. So you could know ahead of time where that trade-off should be. Yeah. All right. This is great. We only have 30 minutes. We're at 10:29. So thank you guys. Thank you, Kevin, for
thank you, Michelle, for having me.
I could talk about this for like hours, but let's keep it within this 30 minutes for everybody. Thank you for coming. I'll send you guys all a 1-pager and we'll also send you the link to this. We'll keep this up on YouTube. So you can look at it at any time, and we'll also be sending out some short snippets of the conversation to share with Kevin. A reminder, at Supplino, we are here for you, for companies, for supply chain talent and expertise like Kevin, and happy to talk to you about your own supply chain needs and challenges at your own business. So take care, everybody, and thanks for a great session.